another sequel that I owned as a child and having fleeting memories of because it's been so long. Oh, I see what's happening here. I'm stuck in a time warp and I found myself in Groundhog's Day, which is tangentially related to the topic of today because both have hog in the name and this opening bit is going completely off the rails. Yeah, it just felt like tackling Sonic Adventure 2 as a continuation from last video, though maybe the outcome might be wholly different from previously, as I can recall playing SA2, specifically Battle, far more than SA1, which was DX, and I would have to rent it, and developing a taste for it more. A kinda reverse, almost, from BFBB and SBMG, though I did own both of those at the same time, so the comparison doesn't completely get off the ground. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder to get your name in the credits, additional videos like thumbnail time-lapses and the Showtime Reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't. I ain't your Uncle Buck who likes to. They did this joke in Far Cry 3. And a bunch of other things, but I remember Far Cry 3 specifically. Where was I the last time I was here? Technically Berserk, but seeing as that history was essentially a recap on the series, that leaves me... picking up right where I left off with Sonic Adventure. How fortuitous. With all the issues facing the Dreamcast among some of the other problems related back to the development on the console, Sonic Adventure 1 had a somewhat steep mountain to climb. In fact, in an interview with GameSpot, Yuji Naka, creator and then producer for Sonic, and Shoichiro Iramajiri, then Sega Enterprises president, gave out a few numbers on the cost of Adventure 1. Naka goes with, "We're working on the game with about 100 people, so it's definitely bigger than previous Sonic games, but I'm sure it won't be costly as Square's," while Shurichiro doubles up with, "We are hoping on million sales for this game, so it will be paid back." You can feel the confidence radiating from Iramajiri, but this was before release. Seemingly before the Japanese release circa 1998, a market Sonic hasn't done the best in. If you can recall, Sonic Adventure and the Dreamcast are inseparable. One doesn't exist without the other. Development for SA1 began on an incomplete Dreamcast build, presenting a number of foibles. Takeshi Iizuka and Kazuyuki Hoshino, the game's director and designer, mentioned this in an interview with Retro Gamer magazine. "We started developing the game when the hardware was only about 30% complete, so we were constantly trying to imagine what the final spec for the machine might be as we were creating the content. That means undoubtedly a few glitches slipped through the cracks. That's why when the game was en route to being translated, a few Sonic team members went over to America to help patch out the problems, though some defective discs did linger around. Projected to sell 1 million copies, the numbers breakdown goes as follows: 440,000 sales in Japan, 86,000 in Europe for its first 5 days. I can't rustle a total sales figure though, it's probably greater than Japan's as Europe loves Sonic, and 1.27 million copies sold in the US. For the biggin, 2.5 million copies in total and numerous awards and nominations from the industry. It goes without saying that anyone who says that Sonic had a rough transition into 3D, unless referring to 3D Blast and or Extreme, is talking out of their ass, or is secretly late 90s, early 2000s Sega in disguise. Despite all the accolades, the sales beating out what was projected, the legacy that Adventure 1 would have, Sega wasn't impressed. Or, not impressed, but absolutely worried. What they needed was a magic bullet that sadly would never materialize. Their loss of the third party to Sony, who casually ate the Saturn's lunch with the PlayStation, and would soon take the Dreamcast dinner and dessert with the messiah of gaming, the PlayStation 2, wasn't a hurdle, but a steel-plated, lead-lined brick wall, written on with the phrase, Better luck next time. The only way for Sega to look at Adventure 1 as a success at this time, despite the quality of the game, would be for it to get them out of their woes, which was an impossibility. The last bridge had burned, stranding Sega in a sea of uncertainty. A ripple effect that would be felt by everyone under the banner, especially Sonic Team. In an interview conducted by Brian Shea for Game Informer circa 2016, Takeshi Iizuka, who was then producer and leader of Sonic Team, details the strife. Our team of 120 got pared down to 11, sent to America, and told to go make Sonic Adventure 2. Part of what we had to resolve was, how are we going to make the same game with 11 people when we have less than a tenth of the staff on board? I was really tasked with trying to make the impossible possible. Yeah, those 12 people sent over to help translate and patch Sonic Adventure 1, immediately, no wait, or rest, or pass and go, immediately, the team of 11 or 12 were put to work. When interviewed by IGN back in June of 2001, Iizuka, who was in the director's chair again, gave this answer when asked how long Sonic Team had been working on a sequel for Adventure. Well, Sonic Team USA, who is developing the title in the US, was formed 2 years ago. For the first 6 months, we worked on the localization of Sonic Adventure for the US, so about a year and a half. In fact, looking at the release dates, if I may skip a bit into the future, Adventure 1 Japan was 98, America was 99, with the sequel getting a June 2001 release around the 21st of the month. That is, in essence, a year and a half. Not for a licensed title, as those developers are regularly shit on with tight deadlines, but a full-fledged mainline game. Industry hasn't changed, has it? This quote from Game Informer speaks to where Sega was as a company to throw their main developer under the bus. A move like that after the release of a well-received game is one of a company in tumult. Handcuffing a flagship franchise in that manner hinted at bigger changes. Sega was already fluctuating with who's on what during this era. Just look at how many Saturn developers were folded into other aspects of the company. You don't even need to jump that far in all regards. Knights exists as a testament to this. Bringing me to Shiro Mikawa. While originally a designer for the Panzer Dragoon series on the Sega Saturn, he would find his way onto Sonic Team with Adventure 1 handling field design and the A-Life system before his stint as a writer. Before that, not much else. He did voice work for the first Panzer Dragoon, which was 95, before taking a planning role for Panzer Dragoon Saga and coming up with the concept and setting for that game. This was 98 and was the tail end of the Saturn's lifespan, seeing as it was discontinued in Europe that year. Background-wise, Mikawa's reasoning for joining Sega was motivated by the console war. He preferred their games over Nintendo's, but his main interest was in storytelling. He was the kind of guy in high school that instead of copying notes during lectures, he would frame out story ideas. Funnily enough, Mikawa wasn't a big fan of the Blue Blur, answering the question, "What does Sonic mean to you?" on Sonic Channel with this. To be honest, I didn't like Sonic from the Mega Drive era. To be honest, it didn't really suit me. So when I was put into Sonic the Hedgehog, I'll make my own favorite Sonic. I was so excited that I did some crazy things, like dropping a bucket on my head, but in the end I was just dancing in Sonic's palm. He has a big wallet. It's hard to beat him. Continuing with this slight comedy, the reason why Mikawa was picked to handle the story was because he didn't have to have drawing capabilities to plan out storyboards or write. And before any of you say anything, yeah, this is a correct statement because I've had to do this, and I fucking suck with pen and paper drawing. I suck slightly less at Photoshop, but most traditional storyboarding is done by hand and amounts to doodles with set dressing here and there. Back to Sonic Channel, Mikawa does go into this, providing a few of his own storyboards to go along with his story. No, it's embarrassing. The planning team has been involved in storyboarding events since the days of Sonado, but the CG movies were handled by the design team and the actual events were handled by the planning team. I did all the storyboarding for Sonad 2, but I think this is a rare occurrence. I originally wanted to be an animator, but I gave up on that path because I didn't have the drawing skills. But I learned that directing, storyboarding, and story creation don't depend on drawing abilities, so I took the opportunity to become the story director for Sonad 2 and taught myself how to storyboard and draw, trying to do as much as I could on my own. Meikawa put in the work, winning over the skeptical Sonic team, allowing the, well, not first-time writer, but close enough, to suggest a few ideas of where this second adventure would take Sonic, giving us the background of space and the high-tech colony arc. While these were new venues to explore with the Hedgehog, due to the shortened production time, Sonic Team relied on the old faithful that helped them with Adventure 1. The real world. Instead of sightseeing in Peru to get a better picture on how these stonework ruins were laid out, the ancient world was replaced with the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. That was where Sonic Team USA was stationed during development. Returning to IGN, Iizuka provides the following when asked by the interviewer about the American influences. Since Sonic Team USA is residing around San Francisco and the Bay Area, we see a lot of the beautiful images here in San Francisco every day, and we wanted to apply those elements in the game. Of course, the world of SA2 is a fictional world, so our intention is not to create a simulation of San Francisco, but we're really inspired by what we see in the city. As for the other stages, since we came to the US, we've gone on various trips to places in the US like Yosemite Park. Since most of our research, in level design, was predominantly done in San Francisco, and the fact that we're developing SA2 in the US, we wanted to make SA2 have more of an American flavor. You'll see a lot of the settings inspired by America. It is fitting, after all. Sonic was always more popular overseas than in his home country, so why not play that up? His favorite food is the unabashedly American chili dog, so why not have him run up and down the streets of San Fran, or the closest approximation of it? There is another goofy story attached to this. As the team was stationed in the Bay Area, they had to deal with the usual problems of parking and tickets. So much so that as a bit of a catharsis, one of the ticketers' cars was rendered in-game for you to smash. Green Hill Zone even made a sneaky return after Iizuka was told by an artist that they wanted it included. However, a majority of Sonic Adventure 2's development is because of the constraints. Any leftover idea from Adventure 1 was repurposed for 2 if it could, while the game was shrunk down in scale due to time limitations. Telling it concisely to Game Informer, Iizuka hits us with, "It was a small development team, so we were able to condense all the good elements from the previous game and deliver a story and game that was satisfying to players everywhere. That's why instead of 6 stories, we have 2 with an epilogue. That's why the gameplay styles have been dropped to 3, with all the characters getting equal amounts of screen time. It's partly why hub worlds have been dropped in favor of streamlining the experience. Adventure 2 uses the same engine with a couple of upgrades because what else are you supposed to do when you're given a year and a half to crank out a complete game? All the additions were either from Adventure 1's cutting room floor or could be easily implemented in the design skeleton like grinding. Shout out to Soap Shoes for the sponsorship deal. One of the bigger things to come out of Adventure 2's creation was that of a rival to Sonic by the name of Shadow. Intended to be a darker, evil version of the Blue Blur, Shadow originally went by the name Terios the Prisoner during Adventure 1's development. When explaining to Eurogamer circa 2024, Sonic team designer Kazuki Hoshino said this: "When we originally started development, Shadow was first called Terios, and his character was more obviously evil. So in his earlier design, we were trying to give him a more evil appearance. And at that time, I personally called him Terios the Prisoner. However, this was simply a concept that would be dropped until Iizuka and Meikawa took another look into it. Instead of going full edgelord, Iizuka settled that the character should be more palatable by turning him into an anti-hero. Was the style at the time in the late 90s, early aughts. Blade, Lethal Protector Venom, and of course, Spawn. They even got the same coloration and everything. Oh, and maybe, possibly, Vegeta. Maybe. Probably not. An article by The Gamer goes into this. Izuka surprisingly replied to the question by claiming that Vegeta wasn't an inspiration and that it was actually characters like Spawn who acted as a key influence. Like, there was that keyword on one concept art piece, which was covered up during an event covering Shadow, but that applies to the old Terios design from my understanding of this. In fact, the article mentions that here. As posted by Twitter user AdriWindGB, Shadow being inspired by Vegeta has been known for a while now thanks to concept art from Sonic Adventure 2. The concept art lists several keywords for Shadow, who looks like his original Terios design, and one of the phrases included simply reads, Vegeta. I wouldn't conclude that Terios and Shadow are the same character because there was a design shift, because the fundamentals of what the character was going to be were changed. Mayukawa goes into this on Sonic Channel. Well, it was a very difficult birth. The proposition was to create a character that was as cool as Sonic, or even cooler. The order for a black hedgehog was already decided, but it took quite some time for the thing to start speaking in my head. One night, while I was in the car on my way home from work, I was thinking of lines for the Sonic vs. Shadow battle scene. I found you, Fake, the first time I spoke to Fake. Aren't you the fake one? When he answered, and I was like, this is it! From the tone of the voice that echoed in my head at that moment, it was decided that Shadow would naturally refer to himself as Boku. Shadow's use of the self-pronoun I is very popular among women, but I remembered that there was a lot of opposition within the team at first. However, I personally saw Shadow as a very sensitive and pure character, so this I was something I couldn't compromise on. Also, we lack context in this situation. Perhaps the keyword Vegeta was written as a joke, or maybe legally Sonic Team can't have that being aired around, otherwise Shueisha might go after their jib if the Vegeta connection is even true, which I have reserved doubts over. I'm also of the belief that two parties can come to the same idea in different ways without knowing what the other one is doing. That's why I don't like the Super Sonic and Super Saiyan comparisons either. They're both super modes with gold as their primary color. That's where the comparisons begin and end. How many characters exist that we don't bandy around the same way like we do Shadow? If we're continuing this flawed line of thinking presented by the Vegeta-Shadow connection, that'd mean Takumi Inui from Kamen Rider Phi should have this labeled at him as well for being inspired by Shadow because all the elements are there. Instead of, taking his character for his character, because even though Shadow and Phi's have the same color scheme and the same character mentality, they are wildly different. People are wanting to one-up a creative for whatever reason. It's the same mindset of calling someone's OC a clone of another character because of a few shared traits, which is just extremely disrespectful. I digress. And so does Sega, because come the end of January 01, a few months before Sonic Adventure 2 would hit store shelves, they dropped this bombshell. They were pulling out of console development. The seeds were already sown during the lead up to the new millennium, and they had finally sprouted. Sega could never focus on what console they wanted to push next because of the split between the American and Japanese teams. Did we want to push the Saturn or keep to the Mega Drive? Why not both? That meant doubling costs on hardware because you need to divvy up between the two groups, and that is if you return a profit. How many people in America went out of their way to purchase the likes of the Sega CD and 32X in '94 when the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64 were right around the corner? Better yet, why stick with the Genesis when the Saturn was released around the same time as the add-ons? And you could apply my first point to the Saturn as well. Why buy it when you could toss your money at the 64 and PlayStation? Both had support from their developers. Not only are you effectively paying more for cartridges than switching to discs, referencing that balancing out dilemma from RE Survivor I went into, you're eating both the costs and actively fighting against yourself while your opposition kicks you while you're down. Cost-wise, the Saturn and the Dreamcast weren't cheap to purchase because of the higher-end hardware. USA Today runs down the Dreamcast. Analysts say turning profits on the Dreamcast is difficult because of its costly technology. Sega has been forced to cut Dreamcast price on both sides of the Pacific to boost sales. In Japan, it went for $255 at its launch in 1998, but was marked down to $170. In the United States, Sega slashed prices of its Dreamcast console to $149 from $199 last fall and offered $150 rebates to spur sales. Rebates that hurt profits overall. On the developer side of things, who was backing Sega? Nintendo, while on the outs with the third party, still had a huge library of self-developed characters to rely upon among their exhaustive subsidiaries, while Sony was holding all the cards, having snatched them away while Sega was sitting the Saturn out to die. EA took their ball home to Sony. All these games in an affordable price tag? No wonder why the PlayStation won that war. The numbers prove all. By the time of 2001, Sony had sold 76 million PlayStations with a few million 2s in Japan, that console having just hit the market, while Nintendo had 30 million for the 64 and 105 million Game Boys gearing up for the GameCube and Advance. Where was the Dreamcast? 5.9 million. Peter Moore, Sega of America president and CEO back during 2000, theorized that the Dreamcast would need to sell 5 million units by the end of the millennium year for the console to stay viable. Youch! With USA Today rubbing more salt in the wound. US sales of Dreamcast, launched in the fall of 1999, totaled 4.5 million through December, running below the company's plan to reach 7.5 million units by March 31st, according to the Gartner Group, a research company based in San Jose, California. The death of Sega as a hardware brand was etched in stone. They are the final casualty of the console war, the all quiet on the Western Front, proving what happens when you try to push out technological advancements at extortionate prices with no games to buy or lacking support. It's what happens when your consumer base and third party lose faith in you. A lesson that hasn't been learned with the likes of the Wii U, Xbone, and PlayStation 5 recent memories. Include the Ouya and Stadia here as well. The one good thing about Sega dipping out of consoles, as, oh boy, there were a lot of layoffs, was that they could focus as a developer and publisher, their first major collab being with Nintendo on the GameCube with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, the updated re-release of Adventure 2 that was worked in secret alongside the base game. They would go on to build their rep as a stalwart third-party developer and publisher, home to Yakuza, Valkyria Chronicles, a good number of SMT and Total War titles, to be trusted in the sense that most companies can be slightly trusted. Okay, I'm still salty about Total Warhammer 3 even if I still play it semi-regularly. Guess that leaves me here with release and version. Sonic Adventure 2 would basically have a worldwide release in June of 01 on the Dreamcast, with Battle following closely since it saw a December 01 Japanese release on the GameCube, but everyone else getting it through the year of 02. I played the Dreamcast version as an excuse to continue talking about Sega and the Dreamcast, though I would suggest the HD remake on Steam, or if you too are feeling nostalgic, to Battle on the GameCube. Sonic Adventure 2 is split between two halves, Hero and Dark, with a last story as a conclusion, having a clearer chronological order compared to the around 6 perspectives in SA1, which were happening sometimes concurrently, other times not. As such, I'll cover what happens in SA2 in order since I don't have to jump around too much. That said, our tale begins at Prison Island 2100 Hours. Eggman, up to his newest scheme, is seemingly leveling the facility to the ground en route to the inner sanctum, monologuing about his grandfather, named Gerald Robotnik, and the secret weapon he was developing. Turns out, Gerald had created his own Sonic OC way before it was popular, Ivo mistaking the hedgehog for Sonic. No, this is Shadow proving his allegiance to his quote-unquote master by dismantling a robot walker before beseeching Eggman to find the Chaos Emeralds and bring them aboard the space colony Ark.
Is that you? Are you trying to spoil my plans again? Wait a minute, you're not Sonic? This is impossible.
My name is Shadow. Since you were so kind to release me, my master, I will grant you one wish.
But what did you mean when you said you will grant me a wish?
Bring more Chaos Emeralds.
Shadow, wait!
I'll be waiting for you in the central control room on the space colony Ark.
Only then can Shadow make good on the wish he promises. The next day at 1100 hours, Knuckles has the misfortune of having to defend the Master Emerald from a jewel thief. I mean, Angel Island's probably back in the ocean since the emerald is not on its pedestal, but a bat with a huge personality is up in his face trying to steal the Echidna's legacy, so let's keep to the pressing matters. This is Rouge, who prides herself on being the bat version of Catwoman. Creative name goes here, but from right under both their noses is Eggman with a sticky hand. The Chaos Emeralds and their master radiate the same energy, so the Doctor would take this as a bonus if not for Knuckles' blatant disregard for his guardianship. If it wasn't already sunk, guess Angel Island is now. But hey, Knuckles has already had to find the lost pieces before when Chaos erupted from the gem, so he'll do it again, this time with Rouge on his tail. During the kerfuffle, Eggman slips away with nary a bruised ego, heading back to his secret pyramid base. 1300 hours. Sonic somehow finds him under arrest by Gun, the Guardian units of the nations, which acts as a global military and peacekeeping force. Though this is a bit odd, seen as the reason for his capture is because of Shadow's doing, which we don't see until 2000 hours, where we and Eggman watch a news report detailing how a mislabeled Shadow, the caster calling him Sonic, stole an emerald from the Federal Reserve, sounding like it was a recent incident.
Do it! Get that hedgehog!
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better. Yeah!
We interrupt this broadcast for an important news flash. There has been a break-in at the Federal Reserve Bank today. Mysteriously, the only thing that was stolen was the Chaos Emerald. According to eyewitnesses at the scene, the suspect was identified as the world-renowned hero, Sonic the Hedgehog.
So, either Shadow did some other crimes, like stealing people's wallets to frame Sonic, or the time difference wasn't accounted for to make these events line up. Either way, atop the Golden Gate Bridge, Shadow suffers an episode of PTSD, reliving the day that his friend Maria Robotnik, Gerald's granddaughter, was shot and killed by Gun aboard the Ark. Her final desire? Revenge.
Maria!
What?
Shadow, I beg of you, please do
Maria.
it for me. For all the people on that planet. Sayonara, Shadow, the Hedgehog.
I still remember what I promised you. For the people of this planet, I promise you. Revenge!
Having seemingly been running for the entire day, which, thinking about it, yeah, that is fairly normal for him, Sonic finally gets cornered by a gun walker, and though he decommissions it, Shadow springs an ambush on the blue blur right afterwards. Harnessing the power of his ill-gotten Chaos Emerald, Shadow bends space and time with Chaos Control, outspeeding Sonic before throwing a bit of shade his way. As he still has a plan to enact, Shadow teleports away, leaving Sonic to be rearrested.
Chaos Control!
He's fast! Hey, it's not his speed. He must be using the Chaos Emerald to warp.
Shadow, I'm the world's ultimate life form. There's no time for games. Farewell!
Shadow, what is he?
2 hours after this, so 2200, Rouge, in spite of Eggman's claim of his base being impregnable, impregs it on behalf of Gun. I wonder if that word choice will have any ramifications. Reaching the Eggman's lair, the Bat finds a teleporter with coordinates to the Ark, the Doctor having to manually turn on the power for the station as it was cut off about 50 years ago. One guess as to what happened back then. Reuniting with Edgy the Hedgy, Eggman gets a history lesson on the Ark that boils down to the Hog gassing up one of Gerald's inventions, the Eclipse Cannon. A weapon surpassing Metal Gear, as it can destroy a whole planet at the measly cost of, a few Chaos Emeralds. 7, in fact. Eggman Land, here we come, as the trio of the Doctor, Shadow, and Rouge, undercover, plot to gather the remaining Chaos Emeralds.
Large amounts of energy are necessary.
Oh, so that's why we needed the Chaos Emerald.
Exactly. To reactivate the machine, we need the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Once you have that, then you have the ultimate power of destruction to use as you please. And then, the world could be yours.
Flashing forward to the following day around 1100 hours, their plan goes into motion. Having found 3 more emeralds on Prison Island, Rouge will stealthily steal them as Eggman runs distraction and Shadow sets us up the bomb. Once they get signal, they'll leave before Gun knows what has happened. Granted, parts of the plan go awry as Tails and Amy have a dust-up with Eggman and Shadow as the heroic duo want to and do free Sonic, the 2 blurs having their second showdown somewhere in the jungles of the island, and Rouge winds up getting trapped by some gun troops, leading to Shadow having to chaos control her off the island before it becomes a damn sight bigger than Nebraska.
Not bad, huh? I'm pretty strong, all right.
This is Rouge. I've got a small problem. I can't believe that I'm trapped inside this locked safe with a Chaos Emerald. I guess I won't be able to call myself a treasure hunter anymore.
No one besides Gun suffers any casualties. Meanwhile, and about 6 hours after Prison Island's explosive fate, Knuckles tracks down more Master Emerald pieces in the Pumpkin Hill region. Really? Making good on that time you have, Knuckles. At an undisclosed time, Shadow relives a better memory with Maria, cluing us in that perhaps grandson and grandfather have different takes on science, before Rouge gives her thanks to her savior, drawing him out of it. Seeing that everyone else is gathered, Eggman announces to the team that it might be time for them to present their demands. 6 emeralds is enough for a demonstration. Day X, 1800 hours. In a scene that most of you probably know a parody of, Eggman flexes on Earth before firing the Eclipse cannon at the moon, blowing up half of it. If his demands aren't met, well, the tides of the Earth are already in balance, so the apocalypse is right around the corner. Immediately afterwards, Eggman throws some form of a hissy fit, probably egged on by Shadow, who's claimed that the cannon can't fire until a massive amount of time has passed, meaning that the window the Doctor has given to the world is incorrect. Or maybe we didn't take him seriously on Twitter. I don't know. Point is, they'll need the last Chaos Emerald to fire another shot from the Ark without spending a week waiting and getting laughed at for their troubles. In his efforts for stopping the missile crisis and beating back the Egg Walker those few years ago, Tails was awarded a Chaos Emerald by the city of Station Square, making him prime target for Team Egg. Being witness to the destruction of half the moon, Sonic, Tails, and Amy theorize that with one Chaos Emerald, they can find the rest and thus stop Eggman, the group splitting up to avoid Gun. Unrelated to the plot for the time being, and at 2100 hours still on Day X, Knuckles finds more Master Emerald shards, this time in Aquatic Mine. That takes him about 12 hours, but thankfully the Echidna joins up with Tails and Amy so he can get folded into the main plot. As we already know, the remaining emeralds are in space, though Team Sonic figures this out by interrupting a conversation between Eggman and the president of...
Pose.
Yeah. Not once has the phrase United Federation been mentioned, but that's the standing federal nation Sonic lives in? Before I begin to wonder what the geopolitical situation is in the Sonic universe, Rouge and Shadow tail team Sonic, warning Eggman that he'll have visitors at the pyramid. 4 hours after the run-in with the president, the Doctor makes good on his housewarming gifts, though the likes of King Boom Boo and Egg Golem are no match for Sonic and Knuckles, and they bogart a shuttle into space. It's not without some difficulties, however. A crash accidentally opens up the cargo bay and jettisons the Master Emerald pieces Knuckles had collected into space. Having switched our time format, as instead of military, we've gone over to a countdown for the cannon, giving us 2 hours before the eclipse, Rouge does some sleuthing with her downtime. Inputting password Maria that she fished from Eggman, the Bat extracts Shadow's file from the database. Presenting to us Chekhov's lizard amidst confirmation that the black blur is indeed the ultimate life form. Before gathering up all the information for her gun handlers, however, the Ark alerts Rouge to the Master Emerald's presence. At around the same time, Sonic, Tails, and Amy run down their strategy to disable the Ark, involving a fake Chaos Emerald that Sonic will place into the core, while Tails will disable the power supply. Amy? Emotional support. A few minutes between then and now, Knuckles and Rouge cross paths with all the emerald pieces in tow, a battle leading to a rescue as the Echidna stops the Bat from falling into a power relay. T-minus 58 minutes until Eclipse, Eggman, in his pyramid base, scans his surveillance footage to determine Sonic's scheme. It'll take a bit more to get one over on Eggman, though before Shadow can go and confront the heroes, Eggman calls him off to say that it is his job as the mastermind. However, if the egg cracks, it will be up to Shadow to pick up the shells.
It's in history as the ultimate genius. Something happens which counting on you to finish the job. Hurry! The moment for attack has come. It's now or never.
33 minutes until Eclipse. Eggman holds Amy hostage, pulling Sonic and Tails away to try and rescue her, but while the blue blur tries to flatter Ivo, the Doctor sees right through it and encapsulates Sonic for a one-way re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Busy with a second duel against Eggman, Tails is unaware that via the fake Chaos Emerald, Sonic somehow performed Chaos Control and is now currently rushing to the cannon to stop it from firing.
turned into a big-time villain, Doctor.
Whoa! You thought you could trick me with that fake emerald, didn't you?
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails!
Because you just told me, Fox Boy. Now, for a little space ride. The capsule clears the colony back.
I'm counting on you, Tails. And Amy, take care of yourself.
Farewell, Sonic the Hedgehog.
It has the same wavelength and properties, but is less powerful than the real one.
The same wavelength and properties. But can I do this?
Sonic!
Farewell, Sonic, my admirable adversary. Now we have some unfinished business to take care of.
On his ass, though, is Shadow, who, having confronted Rouge on her double cross, who thrust his mysterious past at him as a response, manages to beat Sonic, allowing Eggman, who surprisingly defeated Tails, to place the final emerald in the Eclipse's core. Instead of world domination, though, a system error occurs. A shift in trajectory. The cannon isn't gonna fire because the whole of the Ark is gonna crash into Earth.
What's that vibration?
Hey, wait. Someone is coming.
You haven't given up yet?
Oh, it's all over for us.
What do you mean?
I just received a message from my boss. This space colony Ark is currently approaching the Earth at an incredible velocity.
Pre-recorded for when all the emeralds are gathered, Gerald Robotnik's last will and testimony broadcasts across the Earth and Ark. Right there, on the firing line, does Eggman's grandfather promise revenge on the Earth that took away his colleagues and granddaughter those odd years ago when Gunn boarded the Ark to shut down his project. With 27 minutes left until existence ceases as we know it, Eggman realizes the folly of his awakening of Shadow, unaware of how fucking insane Gerald was driven to be, and opts to join in helping Team Sonic and the now acting alone Rouge immobilize the Ark's descent.
I plan to give you a taste of my revenge once all the 7 Chaos Emeralds are collected. Once I initiate this program, it cannot be disabled. All of you ungrateful humans who took everything away from me will feel my loss and despair.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No.
Ready!
What's going on here? Who is that?
I don't quite know what happened or what went wrong. Was it a mistake to create the ultimate life form? I thought it would be something that would benefit mankind, but then the military guards landed on the colony that day. They were sent to destroy the research project that I had been working on. My colleagues at the research facility, my granddaughter, Maria, I hope you are all safe. The colony was completely shut down, probably to keep the prototype from falling into the wrong hands.
The Ark was shut down under the premise that there had been an accident. I found Maria's name among those who died when the Ark was shut down. She meant everything to me, and I couldn't bear the thought that she died because of my research. I lost everything. I had nothing more to live for. I went insane. All I could think about was to avenge her. Somehow, someway. I got scared as I no longer was able to control my thoughts.
All I could think about was that I wanted it all to end. Based on my original projections, I was able to complete my project, Shadow. I designed its mind to be perfect, pure. I will leave everything to him. If you wish, release and awaken it
If
to
you
the
wish to
world.
fill the world with destruction,
Racing to their positions, the combined efforts of Team Doesn't Have a Good Name, or DING, open up access to the Sanctum of the Ark for Sonic and Knuckles to deploy the Master Emerald's negation ability on the Chaos Emeralds. Moping around, 20 minutes left until everybody dies, Amy finds a victorious Shadow basking in his achievement, until Amy points out the fallacy of nihilism in a rather bizarre way. However, this attempt unlocks a memory within the Black Blur's head. Maria didn't want revenge. She wanted a better future for people's dreams. Shadow himself may not have dreams, but he can protect dreams. Open your eyes for the next 5 different franchise. As I've gone back to relating series back to Kamen Rider again, Shadow spends 5 minutes hurrying along to the core, where Sonic and Knuckles have been navel-gazing. No joke, they've stopped in their tracks to admire the architecture, as it is a one-to-one replica of Angel Island Shrine, concluding that Gerald did have a working knowledge of Pachacamac's tribe, and it is highly likely he knew about Chaos. As the monster threshold hasn't been passed yet, from out of nowhere, like a certain viper, the Bio-Lizard emerges from Chaos Control. Well, the prototype of the ultimate life form would have gone with a crocodile. Crocodile. Than a gecko? New? Salamander? Not wanting to be upstaged, Shadow takes on his progenitor so that Sonic and Knuckles can render inert the Chaos Emeralds. Despite thrashing the Bio-Lizard, it and Gerald have one last trick up their sleeve: biomechanical transference. Otherwise known as the Bio-Lizard grafting itself to the front of the Ark via the power of its Chaos Drive, so it can continue the crash course the colony is on. Fire to fire, Sonic and Shadow power up the Chaos Emeralds to go toe-to-toe with the final hazard, ultimately stopping the Ark at the cost of Shadow's life.
No way that's getting through!
Shadow, I beg of you.
Maria,
Give them a chance to be happy.
Now, Shadow! Chaos Control!
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
Our story ends with the Earth safe, for the time being, Sonic commemorating Shadow's sacrifice, Eggman giving a little heart-to-heart to Tails, whose jovialness in the face of extinction hasn't changed a bit since Perfect Chaos, Knuckles and Rouge giving too many ideas to the fan artists, and everyone heading home. It can't be understated that, yeah, Sonic Adventure 2 keeps to the same darker tones as its predecessor did. In fact, it's easier to argue that it is bleaker than Adventure 1. To count the ways that SA2 is, let's just look at how each story opens up. Adventure 1 has Sonic rooftop hopping over Station Square, spotting the cops trying to deal with Chaos Zero, who he effortlessly beats back, leading to the next day, where he rescues a crashed Tails. Fairly standard stuff, even if Eggman is waffling on about how Chaos is a god of destruction. Sonic is our out-and-out hero helping other goodies stop a baddie. The 2 points that Sonic Adventure 2 opens with is either Sonic actively running away from the World Military Force gun for a crime he supposedly didn't commit, leading to his arrest and imprisonment on Prison Island, or Eggman storming a secret gun facility for a super weapon that his grandfather Gerald Robotnik created as the first step in the Doctor's newest world domination scheme. Quite a jump in the morally gray department for Sonic, as he isn't going up against badniks or confirmed bad guys. Gun is a peacekeeping organization, well, on the surface, so the blue blur having to beat back their robots and a piloted walker codenamed Bigfoot establishes how murky the goings-on are gonna be. We know Sonic and friends are on the side of justice, but the public wants their heads, upping the stakes right from the get-go. This isn't a normal Sonic vs. Eggman story, immediately distinguishing this plot from the previous. Speaking of Ivo, tone fucking set. This might be the darkest that Eggman has gone up to this point in the franchise, and again, it helps establish the tone and stakes for what is about to unfold. He's no longer the bumbling evil genius getting outsmarted or outplayed by talking animals, or watching his goals go up in smoke. Eggman is ruthless, downright scary with his tactical intellect, as he pulls one over on the heroes from time to time. To call back to a few moments from Adventure 1, his gassing of Sonic and Tails and his manipulation of Knuckles to grab Emeralds 3 and 4 lack a certain edge. More schoolyard bully than criminal mastermind. By the time Eggman does get threatening in the previous game, it's right at the end and only for Tails so he can undergo his character development. Sonic already whooped the Egg Vipers, so the Egg Mammoth, to us the audience, is a sandcastle. Meanwhile, this Eggman starts off as a menace and keeps on the throttle. I doubt SA2 Ivo would stop at what I said about his SA1 counterpart. He would have played a long con with the Echidna, or perhaps kidnapped Tails, as we see SA2 Eggman not only push his weight around, carpet bombing the Prison Island defense grid to give Rouge and Shadow cover, but flex his strategic thinking by targeting the weak link of Amy and holding her hostage to force Sonic and Tails into a disadvantageous situation where the Doctor ultimately came out on top. Back to the top, these are moments 1 and 2, depending on which side you start with, or if you try to go through both at the same time, so Sonic Adventure 2 comes out swinging and plays its hand early. That's why when we get to moments like the destruction of Prison Island via timed explosive, the death of Maria Robotnik, Eggman showcasing the power of the Eclipse Cannon by zapping the moon, Sonic and pals becoming public enemies number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the finale of the Dark Side story where seemingly Team Eggman wins, it doesn't seem too out of the realm of possibility because of what has been presented earlier. Expectations have been set and matched. Part of that is because SA2 handles these moments with sincerity. It wants to tell a story with heavier subject matter and does so with enough grace to make it believable. If a plot takes what is happening with an amount of earnestness and care, your audience will too, regardless of what the scope is. Like, not to completely step away from the subject, but as a separate example to back this point up, think of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon or Rangers games. Despite being Pokemon related, they go for a somewhat foreboding tone, and it lands because both series care about how the plot is constructed and unfolded. Kingdom Hearts is the same way if you want another demonstration, though it tests the limits from time to time. And not to keep fetching this pail, but we saw this with Chaos and Chakamak in SA1. The other part of this equation is that Adventure 2 doesn't forget that this is a Sonic title. For as grim as the plot can get, it still has moments of levity befitting the franchise. Sonic's opening lines are complaining about no in-flight movies or food before stylishly free-falling into the streets of Station Square, so we aren't completely in Bleaksville, or as I like to call it, Westopolis. This might be one of his best outings when it comes to catchphrases or one-liners. Having finally outran the majority of gun troops, Sonic complains that this game of tag is boring. Immediately after one of the tensest moments in the story, Sonic's almost death by atmospheric re-entry, the fastest thing alive cracks to Shadow that he dies hard. Incidentally, probably, Shadow's besmirchment of Sonic during their battle in the jungles of Prison Island has a bit of a mocking hilarity to it as an insult. "You're not good enough to be my fake and I'm the coolest" showcases that the ultimate life form isn't all doom and gloom. He has smug superiority. While I've bigged up Eggman as the most menacing version of the character to date, his aims are still in service of Eggman Land and proving how big a head he has. He's still going with his usual theatrics, like how he announces to the world his demands on every TV screen imaginable before blowing up the moon. The threshold hasn't been crossed, which is what I think makes the final push of the story intriguing to me. On the surface, I enjoyed Gerald Robotnik's inclusion in the plot. A lot of it is a continuation of what was previously introduced into the framework of Sonic for the Adventure series. The inciting incident of Maria and everyone aboard the Ark dying at the hands of Gunn is still framed purposely off-screen with implication doing the heavy lifting, much like how we never see the exact actions taken against the Chow by Pachacamac's tribe in Adventure. Gerald's madness and wishes of revenge are born from a sympathetic place, akin to Chaos and his breaking point. You can't help but feel bad for the villain, as it was an out-of-their-hands circumstance that pushed them down the slope. Gerald was minding his own business as a researcher wanting to better the world, and Chaos was simply vibing in the moment with his Chow, with some people not taking too kindly to that. Okay, bear with me, I know why Gunn did what they did, but I like to believe that Shadow the Hedgehog and Black Doom don't exist, and by this point they didn't, so let's overlook that, shall we? The overall theme of the story is still rejecting nihilism and finding the good in the world and protecting it, making Shadow an extension of Chaos's lesson learned. I would even clarify that Shadow has a better arc here than Chaos, because we see all the little moments that make up the cycle of his growth. Shadow is one of the three lingering parts of Gerald's will. Like his creator dad, the Black Blur believes that humanity is nothing but a hive of scum and villainy. We will always find ways to backstab each other if we're on the same side, and what truly takes precedent is a "fuck you, got mine" mentality. However, unlike the other two parts of Gerald's trifecta, Shadow was purposely created with a three-thinking mind. He has his own emotions, his own will. Shadow can reason and be reasoned with, and as such can be asked to help or receive help. Roundaboutly, Gerald set up his own failure because the Hedgehog would see the benefits of teamwork, of placing trust into others, of how even mortal enemies can join together on the same side to fight off a bigger threat when everything is at stake, of how not everyone is intrinsically out for themselves and can extend a hand, shoulder, or time to a complete stranger. Who truly gets Shadow on the side of good is Amy, who he barely knows. If that isn't proof that Gerald's assumptions aren't correct, I don't know what is, even if her line of thinking is a bit suspect. Yeah, Amy, not everyone who has dreams is intrinsically good. My favorite little character moment in the story is when Eggman and Shadow plan on confronting Team Sonic after they make it to the Ark. Shadow is already dead set on dealing with the visitors, but it's Eggman of all characters that tells Edgy the Hedgy to stay back. Sure, the Doctor's pride is on the line, but his immediate remark afterwards is that if something should happen to him, it is up to Shadow to see the plan to fruition. We know Eggman ain't the trusting kind of guy except in rare circumstances, so to put that out there means quite a bit coming from the Doctor. In the same regard, hearing Rouge over the radio trap during the Prison Island plan reminds Shadow of how trapped Maria felt in her final moments, urging him to rush to action despite his aloof nature. Whereas Gerald isolated himself and fell victim to his despair and hate, tunneling his vision on what humanity is capable of, Shadow is, whether he likes it or not, surrounded by people all who seemingly work together quite well, who express a wide range of emotions other than rage and anguish. Back to connecting SA1 and 2 as I dipped into the main character arc of the game, Maria is to call in human form as they both serve the same angel on the shoulder role for their respective characters. Much of Sonic Adventure 2 is, like I said before, expanding upon what worked for SA1. Where I think it tumbles slightly is that last story seems far too bleak, without putting any of the work to make it stand. This is what I meant by the threshold earlier. I have no problem with how dark this story gets. In fact, I applaud SA2 for continuing to handle such subject matter pretty fairly, as Gerald's whole dilemma can be easily understood, and I just want to give that man a blanket and a cup of tea, but I do dislike how the plot waits to spring this on you. I think why I like Chaos's downfall into lizard-headed monstrosity more is because a good portion of SA1's plot would flash back to Tikal, so we could have some build-up for the water creature's character. If he was so nice and kind back during that age, what truly made Chaos change? It becomes a mystery unto itself to unravel throughout the course of the present storyline of stopping him and Eggman. Meanwhile, while we get a few instances of Maria here and there, it takes until last story for Gerald Robotnik to pop out and give his life's manifesto. It feels gratuitous when I know that wasn't the aim, but that's what happens when you try to rush something straight to the conclusion instead of letting it simmer. You can tell what a year and a half for development did to the story. We never see the happier times like we do with Chaos and Tikal leading to that fateful day where the god was pushed over the edge. What is Maria's character besides girl who gets shot? Shadow cares a lot for Maria, but we never are shown the inner workings of their relationship like Chaos and Tikal. How the Echidna was the reason why Chaos was trapped in the Master Emerald, and she kinda waves off her former friend as a lost cause until Sonic butts in to state that locking the divinity away again won't fix Chaos's corruption. There are neat revelations, particularly with Eggman recognizing how much of a madman his grandfather was, but that's about it. Sprinkling elements here and there makes for far more engaging character development and interaction than having them stand on a soapbox and deliver a diatribe, as that's what it feels like when listening to Gerald in the end. Oh, and thematically speaking, I fucking hate the Bio-Lizard. Giant, goofy beast from 20,000 Fathoms looking ass. Because you want Shadow to reject Gerald's line of thinking by the end for his heel face turn, stepping out of the shadows of despair to fight for the light of hope that Maria believed in, you need something to assume the dead doctor's place, but having it be the Bio-Lizard is so distracting because it comes from out of nowhere and winds up being central to Shadow's change from villain to hero when it's a big dumb monster lacking in any character traits that just appears. No, it having a blink and you'll miss it photograph doesn't count since it's never called attention to until after the fact and only by eagle-eyed viewers. All this talk of hatred, retribution, insanity, and grief by Gerald that I can understand and feel for, only to be deflated by the giant Gila monster of 1950s movie fame. And before you bring up the 50 years it was trapped in the dark of the Ark pointing out how it too suffered, okay. Suffering by itself doesn't constitute a character with motive, drive, relations. You know, characteristics. Chaos was a driving force within Adventure 1, proactively achieving its goal, and we grew to acknowledge it not as some mindless entity, but a divinity that had been wronged in the past and locked away for years stewing in its own madness. In contrast, like with Maria, what can you tell me about the Bio-Lizard besides it being Gerald's guard, lizard? It solely exists as a crutch for the Ark to continue falling towards Earth when, honestly, I think you could have just used the Ark itself. Symbolically, it's as representational to Gerald as Shadow is, and unquestionably shares Robotnik's self-same history. The Ark was a high-tech research lab capable of doing good, just like Gerald was as a researcher that had gone through a traumatic event, the same event that saw the older Robotnik lose everyone he knew, and was shuffled off into a vacuum, a shell of what it once was, focusing completely on destruction and devastation. Gerald turned his brilliant mind towards vengeance, while the Ark is no longer prized as a lab but a weapon quarantined off in space. For the sake of great and vacant Earth, the station has Gerald's face plastered right on it. It is him personified through an object, and the cast spends half the runtime of last story having to switch it off, so clearly this parallel was the point. You could have easily dropped the BioLizard as a concept and expand upon the shutdown sequence of the station by maybe including an AI simulacrum of Gerald stuck in its programming, or possibly thinking that it is the man himself and must achieve its revenge by any means necessary, even if it has to kill Shadow to do so. That provides a fuller conclusion for the ultimate lifeform, where he gets to directly tell Robotnik whose legacy he was supposed to uphold to shove off, and that he's wrong. That he's disrespecting the memories of everyone who died on the Ark, particularly Maria. Extending this, you could have a double redemption where Shadow and AI Gerald die in the process of stopping the Ark from its impact. Gerald did tamper with Shadow's memory to misremember what Maria's dying words were, so not having a meeting of the minds was a missed opportunity, doubly so since the alternative is Gormless life support prototype that is no different from the hero having to slay the dragon and dying in the process. I love Beowulf as much as the next guy, but when you're working with more leads, you kinda have to be a bit more observational of the literary breakdown of your story, less dickheads like me poke holes in a plot that has hastily written all over its conclusion. Gods unearthed, what a lanky sentence to write, but if you can recall, I did say this about how little Knuckles was involved with the history of his tribe when they made that the backdrop of SA1. So at least that track's going forward. If anything, though, Adventure 2 is on par with Adventure 1 and is enjoyable in its own right and as a continuation of ideas from the prequel. I just have some newfound personal gripes with how the revelations go or are dropped. So like Adventure 1 then. I'm definitely split on the presentation, as while I think the game looks and sounds good on its own accord, the mix is uneven and shockingly bad at times, more so than Sonic Adventure 1. Whenever I bring up early 2000s audio mixing and awful balancing, like I have with Devil May Cry, this is the premier example. But before I get to that, I don't know where to start between the graphics and sound. Mostly because while this is a great-looking Dreamcast game, better than SA1 in all regards, most of you can probably hear Adventure 2 without needing to watch footage. Hands up in the audience, how many of you have the opening riff of City Escape lodged in the deeper recess of your mind? Has there ever been a better modern Sonic soundtrack? Not to me, at least, and I love a good number of later OSTs in the franchise like Heroes, Unleashed, Black Knight, Rings, and the remixes of them, and classic Sonic tracks and Generations. The root of the stem for my love of SA2's music, a sizable number are vocal themes when they don't just go extremely hard. I can't think of a single level that has an ill-fitting theme or song that doesn't uplift the stage it's connected to. Check it. I loathe Mad Space. I prefer the sweet release of Brain Rot than spending 1 iota longer in Mad Space. The negative geometry of Chaos Space in all its overwhelming splendor is a welcoming sight to Mad Space. Its jazzy romp is a beyond bombastic bop that makes the pain of the stage sting a little less. If one of the worst stages in the game has a top-tier backing track, you know you're in for a treat for the ears. You can't go 2 seconds without hearing audio bliss, and I'm pretty sure everyone has a different favorite track that they'll immediately bring up when asked which one they like the most. While a majority of the OST is bumping rock, you have segues into the aforementioned jazz with Rouge's stages, the heavier currents of techno and electronica for Tails and Eggman, or rap as seen with all of Knuckles' stages. Hunted P's reputation is mud, but damn it, why does every single track for the Echidna unironically go hard? I actually have a hard time picking which one of these raps I prefer, and it helps, well, it doesn't help, that the instrumentals are all really good. Sonic Adventure 2's music does this wonderful thing where it captures the identity of the stage it plays in, like the spacious and ethereal beats for Space Trip Steps, aka Meteor Herd, the aggressive riffs and drums of Won't Stop Just Go, aka Green Forest, or the melodic undercurrent of Trespasser, aka Lost Colony. Even the more incidental tracks, like the ones used for story moments, still carry this energy like the Military March-inspired strategy, which plays during the planning phase of Teen Eggman's Prison Island excursion, or the somber 3 black noises played during the darker moments of the plot. Still though, the highlights are, of course, the vocal themes, as I've mentioned earlier.
Sonic, Shadow, can you hear me? You need rings to stay supercharged. Before your rings are depleted, remember to change places with each other.
Shadow, let me collect rings. Keep him busy for a while.
Sonic, leave it to me. I'll destroy it.
Where's he get all that power? Power of Chaos Emeralds? Shadow, are you okay?
I'll collect the rings. Now it's up to you, Sonic.
Shadow, you need rest. Let me give it a try.
Sonic, we're in danger. The power will enter the atmosphere in about 4 minutes.
Here I come, you creep!
Just let it go. You just don't know when to give up, do you?
What are you talking about? That emerald's mine. You got that? The Master Emerald contains special powers that neutralize the energy of the Chaos Emeralds. That makes it very powerful.
What the?
What? Please!
Look who's calling who at
I haze here, following the signal from the Emerald. If I'm not mistaken, this is the Master Emerald, is it not? Doctor.
That was pretty rough.
We did it! Let's go, Amy! Yeah!
You little thieves. Did you really think you could get out of here on
and get some, Eggman. Just leave it to me.
This time, as well as the Chaos Emerald, I call on you to destroy these pests. Come out, my servant. Whoa.
Restraining mechanism.
What a piece of junk!
I'm just living by my own.
No!
Crush 40's back with another all-time banger in the shape of Live and Learn, a song centered around Shadow's character growth as a defender of people's dreams, but they aren't the only ones who get the top billing. Paul Shortino, alongside Jun Sunue, who helped arrange a number of the character themes, provides Eggman with his greatest theme in Eggman, an extremely boastful image song that basically is the Doctor's hype man in music form, while the team of Fumi Kumatani, Heigo Tani, Shinobu Shindo, and Everett Bradley gives us the first of Shadow's themes in Throw It All Away, a heavily distorted screed embodying the Black Blur's need for revenge. However, my favorite image song plays during the Bio-Lizard encounter of all places, Supporting Me. Owing to his centralness to the story and his development over the course of the plot, Shadow gets 3 songs dedicated to him: Throw It All Away, Supporting Me, and Live and Learn. While I've already gone over the other 2, Supporting Me is Shadow's realization of Maria's wishes, calling upon her support to face down the remainder of Gerald's wrath in the shape of the Bio-Lizard. The first line outside of the heavily distorted opener is I Believe in My Future, Farewell to the Shadow, while the closer ending with I Know You're Supporting Me. All 3 of Shadow's songs go so well together as it encapsulates his character growth within the game, marrying the story and presentation in a beautiful way. This kinda leaves the graphics in a weird spot because, yeah, they're upgraded from Adventure 1 and are highly detailed with some solid animations. Sonic Adventure 2 still does one of my favorite things the game can do by having the character models update based on what upgrades they have. So, starting off, Knuckles has his shoes and nothing else, then he gets the shovel and iron claws, the air necklace, and the sunglasses, which are all visible on his model. It does lead to the funny joke from Sonic Shorts Volume 5. Knuckles got a tombstone indeed. If I did have one complaint, as I like pretty much all the levels, and the thing to take note of is how wonky some of the skyboxes can be where you can tell that it's a photograph, I don't care for the enemy design this time around. Badniks have a sizable amount of personality, plus they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, so the gunbots, while fitting to their militaristic motif, as most militaries tend to favor boxy plane designs, are quite boring in comparison. You have Weird Floating Beetle, Bomb Robot, and whatever current project the Earth Federation has decided to back for the day before deciding to reinvent the gym again. Or Nemo. Or Jagan. Or Jesto. Or, yeah, all those mobile suits run on the exact same principle, just better firmware and maybe give them a new toy or two. Because, yeah, the standard gun mech either changes out its main gun or is given a shield, but they all look ostensibly the same. It is quite worrisome that the most creative enemy designs aren't original to Adventure 2. I remember the mass-produced gammas and artificial chaos more than whatever gun is pumping out. Also the ghosts, but that leads me down a rabbit hole I wish to never return to. I think I've gone over this before, either during LTA or the Showtime Reels.
Shameless plug, become a ticket holder on Patreon today.
But there were a few formative mobs in video games that shaped me as the gormless blob that I am today. The killer bushes and demon dogs from Spyro, the gator fish from Ratchet and Clank, piranhas from Rayman 3, the usual riffraff in non-horror games. The ghosts make the list. I don't like it when I'm climbing around Pumpkin Hill only to get spooked by a bedsheet, or their bigger cousins in the chambers who look all cutesy then turn rabid. King Boom Boo? Yeah, he ain't nothing. I hate these tiny little bastards in the best way possible. But I think what most people remember from Sonic Adventure 2, for the worse, is its audio mixing. We've had a few bad examples on the show from time to time. Devil May Cry 1 is right there. But I do believe Sonic Adventure 2 has probably one of the worst mixes in video games, next to the Alien vs. Predator RTS on consoles. This is detrimental in the normal way, but it also affects the understanding of some scenes. The first time we have a Shadow flashback with Maria, there's supposed to be an audible gunshot heard. The effects and music are so loud that it gets muddled into the background. You'll hear what I mean if you watch a cleaned up version of the cutscenes or play a modded version of SA2 that tweaks the balancing. Going off that, you have moments where the music is so loud that if it weren't for subtitles, you wouldn't be able to hear what the cast is saying. Sonic and Shadow's first encounter has Throw It All Away blaring at max volume to the point that my internal monologue, which casually sits at 11, tells it to knock it down a few. But you also have moments of bizarre line reading. Sonic's 5-second Toria is odd, and I think some of the Chow Garden lines are lifted from the Japanese track, and quite famously, Sonic telling Shadow to eat his words when the Black Blur hasn't even finished saying them. It's a big bang off of Resident Evil Dead Aim, where the written script, which the subtitles use, and the spoken dialogue wildly differed, creating this presentational anomaly. Adventure 2 isn't as extreme, but you can tell that the dubbing is off. However, the voice cast is still pretty great. Ryan Drummond and Dean Briscoe kill it as Sonic and Eggman. We've lost John St. John, but Lonnie Manila has stepped up to the light of Civvy from background character roles to play the... Can I say that? Should I say that? No harm, no foul. Sensual Rouge and annoying Omachow. Jennifer Dolliard still hits the usual highs as Amy, but newly added to the cast is Scott Dreyer as Knuckles, Connor Bringus as Tails, and David Humphrey as Shadow. Connor is probably the weakest owing to his direction. Same problem I had with the younger Bringus brother Corey with his Tails in Adventure 1, since the higher pitch for the Fox's voice that both brothers go for grates on my nerves. I can handle Amy doing it, but not Tails. Go figure. Inflection is the problem here. I like the written dialogue for Tails, specifically during the final battle against Eggman after he ducks Amy, but the voice takes me out of it a little. However, bringing two flavors of stoic badass are Scott and David as Knuckles and Shadow. The lower tone for Knuckles fits him so much better here, and David manages to fit so many aspects into his performance as Shadow. He really is the star of the show. If it weren't for the imbalanced nature of the mix, Adventure 2 would have a pretty sound presentation highlighting all the ways Sonic Team have jumped from 1 to 2. But because it stares you down from around the corner not unlike the shape, the jumbled mixing is too hard to overlook. There's a reason why some of the top-rated mods for SA2 are centered squarely on rectifying this problem. Sonic Adventure 2, like its predecessor, is a mascot action platformer. Where the split happens is that while Sonic Adventure 1 had around 6 distinct playstyles, Adventure Dos cuts it by half while also adding a few mini-games like Chow Garden and Minicart. Difficulty side of things, SA2 won't be testing your nerves unless you're going for an all A rank run or aiming for 100% completion. That's more tedious than anything else, as it requires you to play every stage about 5 times, once normally, then with modifiers. As before, you still play a story perspective when you choose story mode, but unlike Adventure Uno, there is no open world. You instead play through each stage sequentially until the end of that story path. To see the end of the game, you have to beat both Hero and Dark paths, then you can finish up with Last Story. That means, structurally, this is quite linear as we don't have locations to explore and find goodies like upgrades or Chow Garden items. Those are found in stages instead, though some are given to you for progression, others you have to find. Getting ahead of myself, while SA2 is linear compared to its more expansive Dreamcast brother, you do end up switching between playstyles as you complete a storyline, unlike how you picked a character previously and those stages are all you played. That can either be a blessing or a curse depending on your mindset. However, both sides of the plot do share the same playstyles, so I will be talking about them in pairs. Sonic and Shadow make up the action stages, or as I will call them, speed stages, because every stage has action in it to some degree. Out of the 3 distinct gameplay options, the speed stages are more or less the same as they were in Sonic Adventure 1, get to the end of the level. Just this time though, you are ranked, as with all the stages, with the central idea to keep in mind is going fast. I'll cover this a bit more, as all stage types have a somewhat varied way of scoring a good rank. Bit of ground rules, I am using the Dreamcast control scheme, and some options are the same between the cast. A is still jump, the control stick moves, and the triggers handle the camera, which is inverted, so mad world logic, though I think you can change it in the options. And Y is action selection, which determines what the B button will do. I guess we can call it context sensitive. Obviously, Sonic and Shadow have their homing attack returning from Adventure 1, and it still acts the same, though added to their repertoire is the somersault performed by pressing B. While it functions as a 2-stage attack, the salt followed by a slide, it can be used to fit through tight spaces. Holding B, meanwhile, is the spin dash, itself another attack, though it's more useful for getting a burst of speed. Their upgrades include regulars like the light speed dash, though you no longer have to hold B to charge energy to do it, you simply get near a line of rings and press B, and Ancient Light, their multi-hit move, but they also have a few new entries like the Flame Ring, allowing the somersault to break open gray containers, and Mystic Melody, allowing for teleportation at certain relics. Typically, a Sonic and Shadow stage tasks you, like I said earlier, to get to the end as quickly as possible. That means knowing when to homing an attack chain, somersault, take advantage of shortcuts, unlocked abilities, and the newly introduced grind rails and poles. Grinding is simple. You see a rail, you hop on it, you start grinding. However, to maximize grinding, you have to balance on it while actively crouching by holding B. Leaning too far to one side and your momentum dies a death. Poles, meanwhile, are timing based. You see the red flourish, you hit A, and you springboard farther, otherwise you drop like a stone. Bringing up boards, Sonic also has 2 levels where he's on one, like the opening to Cityscape and the ending of Metal Harbor. B is break in this instance, which helps with cornering, and you can get big air and style points by jumping off ramps by hitting A at the right time. Defeating enemies, collecting rings, being stylish, like successfully speeding through a grind rail segment, using environmental objects, etc., and above all, doing this quickly is how you get A ranks for the speed stages. Stages always award additional points based on how fast you were, time tracked in the upper left corner alongside your score and ring count. Lives are in the bottom left. Dying as anyone will either take you back to the beginning of a stage if you haven't reached a checkpoint, bosses have none, otherwise it puts you at the last one you reached, removing your accumulated score and setting the stage's time to whatever it was when you crossed the checkpoint. Start is still pause, and the reason I've waited until now to bring it up is that while you have the standard continue and quit options, restart plays a factor in dying as it takes away a life when you choose it. You're better off hitting quit if you want a fresh run on the stage for a higher rank. Ranks are from A to E, though in the context of the game, all A ranks is the only thing that matters, and I may be getting this mixed up with 2 Battle, as I think that edition awarded a secondary emblem on the A rank. Emblems are still the main collectible used to unlock bonus game modes. Throughout every stage, regardless of type, you'll run into the obvious pickups synonymous with the franchise: rings, ring boxes, shields, lives, enemy clears, but there also exists a few unique collectibles for this game. Based on what enemy you kill, which to run through them, you have robots that shoot, robots that melee, and some that do both. They aren't really that interesting, sans the camouflage beetle that grants a boatload of points on destruction, and one I will cover later alongside its variants. They will either drop a Chaos Drive if they're gun affiliated or are a Gerald invention, an animal if they're a badnik. You can only hold about 10 before you start rotating them out of your inventory, but these items are used in conjunction with the Chow key you can pick up when you break a Chow crate. If you successfully bring a key to the end of a stage, you lose it when you die, so you have to find another one, you go to the Chow Garden for that minigame. Drives and animals are used to upgrade a Chow's stats to make its races easier, though for this rendition of the game, you aren't told what parameters are increased or decreased. Battle does that, outside of the two hidden stats, and overhauls Chow racing to the point that I'm going to cut myself off here, as outside of the joy of a Tamagotchi, there's not much to do with the Chow. Battle awarded you with additional items to help raise Chow, emblems for more unlocks, and made that system have a point to the point that I could probably take up a whole entire gameplay tag talking about the intricacies of the Chow Garden. It's that in-depth in Battle in the HD re-release. Going away from the garden, while animals are found mostly in badniks, sometimes they are free-floating in the ether waiting to be picked up. Other times you'll see a spigot that requires you to cycle through your actions with Y until you get to whistle. Moving on to the mech stages, or shooting stages if you want to call them that, these make up Tails and Eggman's levels. Remember Gamma from Adventure 1? It's that under a new configuration. Basically, get to the end of a stage while blowing up everything in sight for cash prizes and points, but there's no longer a countdown that'll drop you dead when it hits 0. Instead, Tails and Eggman have a health bar, bottom center of the screen, that depletes when they take damage and regenerates from picking up rings or finding health kit boxes. Rings still function the same for everyone else if you're wondering. B this time around is your Vulcan Cannon, a tiny little bullet that can defeat mobs or break boxes, and Laser Pointer, which you can use to tag enemies or destructible objects so that when you let go of it, you fire out auto-tracking missiles that seek out what was tagged. I'm phrasing it as such because items like dynamite or the weird water heaters can be locked onto with the laser, but the crates aren't considered taggable and have to be broken with the Vulcan. Mech stages and treasure stages do involve a bit of box manipulation, but there are only 3. Wooden, which can be busted open with everyone's regular B attack, gray metal, which need the upgraded version to bust, and black metal, which are unbreakable. Oh, and the cages, but those require the activatable rockets to blow up. The best way to achieve good ranks in mech levels is by trying to tag as many things as possible and letting it rip, as the higher the combo, the better the stylish modifier. Oh, and going fast, but that was already implied. However, you have to be careful, as taking any kind of damage or letting the pointer run for too long causes a fizzle, and with how some enemies quickly sweep through an area never to be seen again, you don't want that to happen. Likewise, a target with multiple parts, like the bomb gun robots, can be defeated by destroying the main body, but if you lock onto as many bombs as possible, then shoot the body, the game will count the bombs you would have fired at as part of the combo. There's not really much to say here, as a lot of mech stages can be summed up as simple platforming, lots of explosions, though there are sometimes the odd switch puzzle or two, and of course the upgrades. Shared between the Fox and Egg are the hover booster, granting delayed descent after a jump for larger gaps, or in the case of Cosmic Wall, limited flight, the bazooka, powering up the Vulcan Cannon so that it can destroy gray metal boxes, and Laser Blaster, embiggening the blast radius of the missile, but only Eggman gets the armor, giving him more health. The two also share the Mystic Melody, but everyone gets that. If I may break away from the mechs to talk about replaying a stage, Once you've finished a level, you can replay it by going to the stage select screen under the single player menu on the title. Here you can either choose to replay a level for a better rank, do a challenge mission for an emblem, down the line they go 100 ring challenge, find the missing Chow, speed run, and hard mode except for the two main kart racing levels, as Rouge and Tails have their own rule set, or go to the Chow Garden with a character who has been there before. Wording is because you have to have finished a stage as a character while holding the key to play as them in the garden. Once you beat a story, you do unlock a free play of sorts so you can hop into a specific moment from it, a few kart tracks, as well as the boss rush. Should I run down the kart sections? A is gas, and control stick steers, and if you want better turning, let go of gas to enter turning mode. Daytona USA, this is? Time extensions, turning mode by letting go of gas. All that's been removed is the gearbox on the cabinet, though a boost has been added for collecting enough rings. Big is literally Sega Bass Pro Fishing, so I wouldn't be surprised if the kart racing was Daytona USA's engine. Rounding out the main trio of stages, treasure hunting levels are exactly like Knuckles' playstyle from Sonic Adventure 1. That means you, Knuckles, and Rouge are dropped into an open area and are tasked with finding 3 items to finish the stage. Items because you aren't always going after 3 Master Emerald pieces. Sometimes it's the Chaos Emeralds, other times keys, depending on where you are in the story. Taking up the bottom center slot this time is the radar, though it has been reworked from Adventure 1. Whereas that game tracked all 3 pieces at the same time, Adventure 2 will only go after the one that is highlighted. So it tracks the item in the first slot, then goes down the way. That doesn't mean that the other items haven't been spawned, as you can find 2 and 3 before finding one, it's just that you get no help from the radar. Knuckles and Rouge's B button is their combo attack, useful for breaking bots and boxes alike, and instead of a homing attack, they have their glide, allowing them to cover long distances and, most importantly, stick to walls and climb. A little note for Knuckles and Rouge when it comes to their attacks. They do have an uppercut performed by rotating the control stick and hitting B. Some levels needed to do it for certain breakables, and because you only figure it out on accident, there you go. Pieces are always placed randomly in a level when you begin it, so you'll have to search high and low by taking advantage of the duo skill set. Perhaps the biggest departure from the other ranks, the way that you get a great score when playing as Knuckles and Rouge is by finding the pieces quickly and without the aid of the built-in hint system. You see the various TV boxes littered across the stages. These throw out hints for where each item is located, but also take away some of the stylish modifier for when you find them. So if you quickly find a shard without any hints, you'll get a perfect stylish ranking and so forth and so on. This also means that pieces can be placed in unconventional areas, like in the ground requiring you to dig, and there are also item boxes in the ground as well, or in an enemy or environmental object that you have to destroy. Upgrades for the duo include the digging ability, which thankfully you don't have to awkwardly select like in Adventure 1. You can, but you don't need to. You simply either press B while in the air or B while climbing if the surface is diggable, and the upgraded melee attack that breaks the gray metal boxes. But out of all the ones you can find, make sure you grab the air necklace for Knuckles. As Sonic, Shadow, Tails, and Eggman are hydrophobic, Knuckles and Rouge have had swimming relegated to them with the usual caveats. A swims upward, B down, but if you stay too long underwater without grabbing an air bubble or surfacing, you'll drown. The air necklace, for Knuckles at least, prevents that from happening. Checkpointing is a bit different from the rest of the cast as well. While the non-treasure hunters have the checkpoint spinners, Knuckles and Rouge are checkpointed when they find a piece. Of all the stages as well, treasure hunting can be the most acceptable to RNG, as a good run boils down to memorization and knowing when to refresh the level for better positions. That's why I said tedious earlier. In between all these regular levels are boss stages, generally defeated by either attacking when they are vulnerable, attacking freely because you can, or waiting for them to do their routine, then attacking them. 3 sets of rival fights, and they're all kinda meh. Like with Sonic or Shadow, you have to attack their back so the first fight can be over in a flash, while the second you have to wait for them to use their special move as it leaves them open, while the treasure hunting and mech twosomes are happy slaps. As long as you can reach the cockpits, the 3 walkers can be damaged regardless of what they're doing. Final Hazard is typical supersonic affair, so a bit of a floaty mess. Egg Golem, as both Eggman and Sonic, can be rushed down faster than a strategist in Marvel Rivals, leaving King Boom Boo and Bio-Lizard as the most in-depth of the bosses, and all you have to do of them is wait and avoid their attacks until you can strike back. Which, with King Boom Boo, you can one-phase them. Huh. Guess you're useful for something after all, Bio-Lizard. Completing Hero and Dark Story modes unlocks Last Story, broken down into one extended stage where you play as all the characters except Shadow, and then you have 2 bosses which involve the Black Blur. Outside of the Knuckles and Rouge segments of Canon's core being more switch flicking and swimming than finding free objects, it's not too distinct from everything else before it. No, but the real reason why you want to try and get every emblem in the game is because there is a hidden stage that only opens when you have every single one. A 3D Green Hill Zone which you play through as Sonic. What a neat little Easter egg that I'll never unlock. And if you're wondering about the multiplayer, you race each other to the end of a stage as Sonic and Shadow, or to find items as Rouge or Knuckles, or beat each other up as Tails and Eggman. If you want a better multiplayer experience, play Battle. There's more to it. Coming down to these last tabs, I'll break them up per character pairs as there's a good amount I like from what is offered. First of which is how refined the mechanics are. From 6 down to 3, the strongest identities from Adventure 1 have been retained here and elaborated on. Sonic and Shadow have a better conveyance of speed, with the multitude of set pieces emphasizing how fast the 2 move, and their skill sets are fine-tuned to focus on this by way of simplicity. Light speed, dashing, and all the rest don't feel like gimmicks used in the odd instance or two. By making them a singular button press in certain scenarios, allows them to roll over into the Hog's movesets and become staples that, when used correctly, can help keep up the speed. There's no having to finagle a move out of the 2 like the original Lightspeed Dash, which required you to come to a complete stop, charge it up, then let go. We ain't got time for that, mostly because we're on the clock. That's another change I enjoy from Adventure 1 to 2 with how speed stages function. The ranking system. This applies more to the whole cast, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but Sonic and Shadow feel it the most. Adventure 1 didn't have a ranking system, so outside of 2 characters, Tails and Gamma, there was kinda not a lot of reasoning to get better as certain characters. I'm singling out Tails and Gamma here because of their attached elements like racing against an opponent or the clock, but as long as you got to the end of a stage or did whatever it asked of you, you'd beat a level no sweat. You could bash your head up against that wall until it crumbled. While that is still possible here, your rank will obviously suffer. I don't know about you, but getting to the end of a level and seeing either D or especially E rank close me out doesn't exactly leave me a happy camper. It's an external motivator to learn the ins and outs of both the character you're playing as and the stages themselves. No better is the scene with Sonic and Shadow than in Metal Harbor, Green Forest, and White Jungle. All 3 stages contain a variety of shortcuts, high-low paths, and areas where you can take advantage of unlocked abilities. As the first stage for the blue blur that introduces lightspeed dashing, Metal Harbor teaches you the importance of looking out for ring trails, as not only will they allow you to quickly speed through a section saving you time, but they earn you some stylish points helping with the ranking at the end. But that's not all, as there are a number of homing attack trails giving you shortcuts alongside points, the lead up to the dash upgrade being the biggest one, as it has the camouflage beetle, but also grind rails if you know where to look for them, keeping up the momentum. While City Escape already introduced the somersault's ability to squeeze through tight spaces, you weren't speeding through those areas, unlike how in Metal Harbor, the gates you need to pass are at the end of high speed sequences, presenting you a timing challenge worth some stylish points and retained momentum. Crashing into one, while it doesn't hurt the hog, definitely tanks the clock as you come to a dead stop. Probably the biggest example of what I mean by learning the ins and outs of the stage is the rocket at the end of Metal Harbor, as to get the most out of that timed area, you have to climb to the highest point to latch on, as it is worth more stylish points. Charting the exact pathing and movement to get there is tricky, you have so few seconds to spend, but it is worth it for that massive point bonus and to flex your mastery over how the fastest duo alive control. Sonic and Shadow really are the best example of why a ranking system is a great inclusion to the franchise, as there's nothing like effortlessly blitzing through a stage and seeing the fruits of your labor when it comes to understanding each and every path and which ones you should take to get that A rank. That's why I like the two jungle stages. They really are an expanded version of Metal Harbor, as they take the ideas from it and make them bigger, like with more lightspeed trails, grind rails, and the lead-ups to the vine swings, and the absolutely ridiculous amount of tracks you can take. The vine swings have a few areas you can be dropped off at, depending if you press A or not, and that's not even counting the little nooks and crannies that litter the main path that can take you to alternate areas or dump you off in a different position in a segment you'll have to go through. Like I'll call it the 2D section, as it's like you're looking at a cross section where you can either take the half loops or do a bit of platforming. But I think why I also like them is because of the time limits attached to both. It adds a sense of urgency to your actions. You can't dawdle and have to figure out what's the fastest route, with every little setback bringing you closer to Island Explosion. It's an extension of the time limit that already exists for the speed stages, but much more pressing and in your face about it. That's not to say that I think these three levels are the only good ones from Sonic and Shadow. Far from it, I just like these ones the most. The speed stages do put their best foot forward for both Hero and Dark, as we get City Escape and Radical Highway as the first Sonic and Shadow levels respectively. Both are fan-favorite levels, and it's easy to see why. City Escape is a showcase from how far Sonic has grown from Emerald Beach of Adventure 1 fame, as City Escape is chock full of set pieces like the snowboard opener and the truck ender, and while it is simplistic in the grand scheme of things, simplistic works. City Escape is as pure as a speed level can get, having easily readable shortcuts that take advantage of the homing attack, or timing like with the ramps and poles, laying the groundwork for the rest of the courses. Radical Highway shares the same vein, but applies a tad more danger as Shadow finds himself over bottomless pits with a lot of his pathing. Final Rush and Skyrail play up the grinding aspect, as well as having some of the trickiest speedrunning tactics, like free falling in Rush to reach lower rails, or switching between them in Skyrail's case. Final Chase has the gravity pillars you have to time your jumps between while maintaining speed. You can throw a dart at basically any speed stage and have a favorite outside of one, maybe two if you don't like Cannon's Core. And while that one isn't my favorite level to return to, I like the idea of everyone coming together and having to switch between the playstyles, though earning a high rank is a bastard and a half. While I do think the mech stages have some scattershot quality, some hitting average, others poor, the stages I do like, I really like. That would be Weapons Bed and Cosmic Wall. For his first time playability in the franchise, Eggman has both a great penultimate and ultimate stage, and it's solely because of how much shit you get to shoot. Like, Sonic Team looked at how many things you got to shoot at in Gamma's levels, times it by 2, and made sure a number of objects were multi-parted so you can rack up an even bigger combo when they jumped over to this game. For the context of Weapons Bed, Eggman is running distractions so that Rouge and Shadow can sneak into Prison Island. They absolutely aced it. It feels like you blow up anything not nailed down, with the lines of inactive gun bots my favorite part, as it becomes a challenge of how many I can tag before the laser gives up. At first, they're placed all in a row so you can easily do away with the lot, but then they start getting sectioned off, so you have to be quick about jumping between the separating walls to get as many as you can. Do you try to highlight a whole group and get them platoon by platoon, or play it risky by pressing your luck and seeing how long the laser lasts for by getting the groups together? It warms the cockles of my heart to see the combo number reach double digits, and the stylish modifier be either extreme or perfect, but it also helps that Weapons Bed has a breakneck pace as you hover between the deadly ocean, while Harriers and other assorted gun mechs try to and fail to stop Eggman's rampage. You can, if you're quick on the draw, shoot down the planes and make them a part of your combo, but they only stay in the air for less than 5 seconds before disappearing. Do you let them fire their payload and avoid it, or go for the extra points and prevent them from dropping missiles entirely? Mech stages still have these intricate moments of fast thinking, even when a level is a phenomenally good stress ball, but not to be outdone, Cosmic Wall descends from space to add a few extra tweaks that build upon Weapons Bed's blueprint. The first of which is the level modifier, low gravity. Instead of hovering, you get a limited flight that the stage takes complete advantage of by having a higher scale of verticality. You either rise up and have to clear platforms by destroying pyramid blocks while dealing with threats, as you can only use the Vulcan, or you have moments where you slowly descend with the hover and try to avoid lasers while getting as many bots as possible. A ton of the platforming sections within Cosmic Wall are centered around the lower gravity, like extending your jumps to reach faraway areas while maneuvering around hazards, creating a challenge unique to the stage. Also unique to Cosmic Wall are the shooting galleries, locking Eggman in place while trying to light up as many enemies and objects before they either hit you, dropping your combo if you started one, or slip by your sights, giving you less extensions for your combo and less points from one. It's such a simple inclusion, but one that is much appreciated. Again, I am highlighting the stage I enjoy the most, but there are aspects of the others I do like, such as Prison Lane and Iron Gate's introduction of design elements that act as a foundation that the rest of the levels build upon, as well as Mission Street's chaotic feeling of escaping Gun by just being a chaotic escape from Gun as everything around Tails is blowing up or falling apart. Whether by your hand with the dynamite bundles or because it just is like the roads that crumble off into the abyss. Of all the gameplay styles, treasure hunting does get the short end of the stick, as I'll get to, but it's weird that the one level I praise above the others is Aquatic Mine. Yeah, a swimming stage. I think it might be because compared to the rest, Aquatic Mine isn't pathetically small like Wild Canyon or Dry Lagoon, which have no definitive gimmick, or astronomically large like literally all the others with the most annoying modifier you have the displeasure of dealing with. Apologies to all the Pumpkin Hill fans, but I do think it's too big, leading to some truly horrifying emerald placement. Of the two, I'd have the former rather than the latter, but treasure hunting is one of two extremes without a middle ground except in Aquatic Mine. It's got a good amount of space without being too cramped or too spacious, while the water level of the mine lends itself to some cool level design, like how certain areas open up or close off based on where the water is. And because the air necklace is located in the mine, you can decide at times that if the water level is to your liking, you can swim through the shafts if they are accessible instead of climbing up and down them. Certain hazards also become inactive or less effective based on the water, making areas safer for exploration outside of the relative fear of drowning if you haven't grabbed the necklace. Now, there are problems with this. Digging still requires the correct switch to be flicked so the water isn't in the way, but I'm already stretching myself here to compliment the weakest part of Sonic Adventure 2 if you haven't already figured it out. A problem of concept versus execution. Meteor Herd, Mad Space, Egg Quarters, Death Chamber, Pumpkin Hill, and Security Hall all have interesting concepts that are worth exploring, but the way that they are here just isn't that great. Either because I think they don't go hard enough, maybe play up the stealth in egg quarters, or about as fun as a crowbar to the sensitive bits. I can at least single out 2 stages as the worst, as the rest don't get on my nerves too much, but the central issue with treasure hunting is the reworks and how they mess with the design of the levels. Fixing something that isn't broke turns out to be a poor decision. While I gave the Cliff Notes version of the mechanic, I can see why people invest a not too minuscule amount of time into chow raising. There are full evolutionary paths, ways to optimize skills for races, and generally give all your worldly possessions to your chow. Based on which side you play as, you can either have a hero or dark chow opening up their connected gardens, and that's not even getting into the specialty chow. Battle made this system even better by adding an additional minigame, the arena, fixing flaws like being unable to tell what stats are being raised, and making chow rearing even more of a black hole to lose your sense of self in. Same with the multiplayer, if I may divert, as while it is good here, Battle made it a bigger selling point. Back to what I was concluding to, save yourself from the chow before you fall into. But for real, Sonic Team could make a standalone Chow Garden game and it would sell gangbusters because the systems are so engaging. And if you're leaning more towards the main game, it doesn't interrupt the flow of Sonic Adventure 2. You do a bit of the main game, then hop into the garden, do a bit of chowing before returning to the story, unlike having to find the garden in Adventure 1, which was well out of its way and took a bit of searching to find since there were around 3 separate ones spread all over the world map. Some have the dubious honor of unlocking after certain story moments like the Eggman pool, so you had to do some waiting as well. Same with the specialty eggs that could be a bitch to ferry back and had select availability. SA2 meanwhile is have key, will chow, and our time is worse off because of it. Friends don't let friends raise chow, as it's single-handedly more destructive than Reagan flooding the ghetto with crack during the 80s. If that ain't a gold star recommendation for me, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. As I did with the good, let me break this tab down by gameplay segment, as there are some obvious stinkers here. Redder than a sore thumb, making it my first point of entry. I don't get why they reworked the radar system for the treasure hunting stages. It actively wastes time and makes these levels the longest based on what RNG is given you. For the smaller stages, this isn't too much of a dilemma, it just means you can accidentally pass a piece by if you aren't paying attention. On the larger levels, that's where we get splintering. You can already imagine what stages where this becomes an issue, and while I won't get to every tiny detail, Meteor Herd, Death Chamber, and Egg Quarters suffer from being so spread out that the changes to the radar make finding the randomly placed shards feel like searching for a needle in a needle stack. That in and of itself can be quite problematic as well. The placement of the 3 items feels haphazard at times. Like, someone threw glass shards into a pool, and the only way you know that is once the blood starts flowing. On to specifics, while Sonic and Shadow stages work wonderfully when they're all about going fast and trying to maximize your routing through a level by any means, when they step away from that, do their sections fall apart? Case in point, Crazy Gadget. We all knew this one was gonna be here. Start and stop, the level. Flicking switches, the level. Accidentally falling into pits, the level. If Sonic and Shadow weren't about blitzing through a course as quickly as possible, there would probably be a commendable statement to give. Conceptually, I don't think Crazy Gadget is flawed. Messing around with gravity to the point of running up and down walls fits for the hedgehogs. We see this in Final Chase with the grav tubes and Final Rush with the vertical grind rails. What those don't require is stopping to a standstill so you can fiddle around awkwardly with switches, which can be trial and error. Sonic and Shadow don't handle the best with precision. There's a reason why they tend to magnet onto things like grind rails or poles. Why the homing attack is quite generous. If you've ever missed a lightspeed dash because Sonic and Shadow have fallen off the trail via no fault of your own, congratulations, you've played Crazy Gadget, because that's how it feels to come to a complete stop and try to wiggle the blue blur into position so you can flick a switch. The best parts of Crazy Gadget is when there isn't any of this nonsense, but too bad for you, Gadget goes full hard into its gimmick, making every other room, or what feels like it, dependent on if the gravity has been changed, and convoluting a ton of what was originally simple movement. You don't feel in control. Speaking of, it can be a bit of a nuisance to the controls as well, since the camera generally places itself into strange viewpoints. That makes the last room before goal, a massive puzzle area, more aggravating than fun. If Sonic already didn't like having to go slow so he can change gravity, he especially doesn't like fighting the camera, as the player has little control of it like we're in a classic Resident Evil title, while running sideways up an easily overshot ledge. Crazy Gadget wouldn't be out of place in, say, 2D Sonic, but having that third dimension and expressing greater interest in making the Hog's gameplay be go fast at all costs makes Crazy Gadget the worst of the speed stages, as its enthusiasm for puzzle elements falls on deaf ears and is a poor fit. Pants too loose this time around, as it seems like Pyramid Cave got the balance right. Moving on to mech levels, technically I could make it a toss-up between whichever desert level I like the least, owing to the quicksand's ever-present punishment of minor mistakes, but boy howdy do I hate Eternal Engine. The last of Tails' stages, it is a bit of a whimper, seeing as it wants you to play a snipe hunt. The joy of the mech stages, as lovingly glazed by me during Cosmic Wall and Weapons Bed, is shooting fast, shooting hard, and racking up combos. Eternal Engine looks at that and says, "Huh! What if we hoisted you by your own petard and made it so if you decide to gun down everything in sight, you'll have to deal with more level hazards? Wouldn't that be a fun monkey wrench to throw into the formula?" No, it wouldn't, because mech levels, like what I said about the problems with Crazy Gadget, don't function like a scalpel, but a battering ram. Last time I checked, subtlety and carefulness go out the window. But you can't do that in Eternal Engine, because if you do, you'll get sucked out of one of the 10 vacuums into space you've created. It is directly antagonistic to the way these levels are laid out, so much so that the best way to go through Engine is to treat it like a speed stage, which doesn't help your score because you have to destroy things, but you can't light up everything, otherwise you'll unintentionally spacewalk and lose your score anyway. It's an awful recursion loop where no matter how you dice it, you'll find problems. You can see in my footage how I've locked onto multiple targets that I can pop. Once I see that I have a bundle of dynamite in my chain, I let the laser fizzle out, because that method is the only way to stop yourself from shooting outside of taking damage. Adding more fuel to the fire, Eternal Engine also introduces the worst enemy in the game: the artificial chaos. There's no decent manner in dealing with the standard variant, and even with the other versions, they're liable to hit you before you do them. That's still less frustrating than having to proc the regular one's attack and hope to outpunch them as their tendrils shoot out faster than a blink, followed up by laser vision. Yes, you can use Tails and Eggman's melee option, but you have to get dangerously close to do so, recurring more damage in the process. That's if the Tails and Eggman punch even recognize the artificial chaos as an enemy to bash. As a whole, I can't stand it when an artificial chaos blocks the way, regardless of which firmware it's running, as it leads to a bumbling time, but does Tails get the brunt end of it? There are sections I enjoy in Eternal Engine, particularly the freefall segments and the battle against the Eponymous, but Eggman's Cosmic Wall does the former better, and the latter is one blip in a radar filled with bogeys. Pick and flick all you want, there'll be more to jam up the works. Gross joke aside, and switching to the treasure stages, take your pick. Security Hall? or Mad Space. Mentioned right at the start of this tab, the reworks to how Knuckles' stages are played, plus their ever-increasing size, makes the 9 hunting stages divisive regardless of who you ask, but I think we can all agree that laying additional contrivances on them doesn't help their image. Security Hall's Mad Scramble wants to be like White Jungle or Green Forest, to me the best of the speed stages, but having less time to achieve your goal, 5 minutes opposed to 8 or 10, while having to comb through a vertically imposing map with an unhelpful sonar makes the penultimate Rouge stage a mess. With what I said about both jungles, Sonic and Shadow are built for getting through areas as quickly as possible. Almost every single one of their courses facilitates or challenges this. Because Knuckles and Rouge stages want a blend of fast and slow, where you rush into an area where you think a piece might be before carefully searching for it once you get a blip, putting a strict timer on the affair ties one hand behind your back. You can't spend the time to reason out where you've been and where you haven't because the timer doesn't let you. Rush, 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 and if anything stops you, that adds up, so you wind up making smaller mistakes where you normally wouldn't. And gracious grave lords forbid if an emerald is in one of the saves, as that requires you to climb all the way to the top of Security Hall, activate the specific blocks so they're online, which only one stack can be, so if you don't know, that's a fatal error. Go to the safe you think houses one of the 3, and then dig, which has a pretty wonky hitbox, repeating if that was the wrong one. That takes a good chunk of time away from you as is, so if more than one is locked behind a safe, good luck clearing before the bomb goes off. How I got a B rank, I don't know, and I only had 30 seconds to spare on the timer. By the way, while you are checkpointed after finding one of the trio in all of the treasure stages, your score still goes up in smoke if you have to restart, so you are better off beginning Security Hall fresh if you want the A rank rather than trying to salvage a bad run. Meanwhile, Mad Space be like, that bat was on the moon. While I don't condone drug abuse and the illicit dealings of the trafficking industry, the best way to visualize playing Mad Space is a bad trip off of whatever is your preferred hallucinogenic. Mad Space, more like Mad World, as your controls and camera constantly have to deal with getting ganked by the gravitational pull of the celestial bodies you'll find yourself on. You can't simply point at a direction and go like the rest of the Treasure Hunter stages. If you can't escape the pull of whatever asteroid you're on, you can't leave it. So unless you can jump high enough and force a separation, you'll need to find one of the mini rockets and then memorize which ones take you where in case you think a shard is on another body. This green cylinder is the bane of my existence. Climbing is gimped because of that reason. Nothing is connected to each other, so the only reason to climb is to either grab a shard or position yourself to land on a lower area. Your best bet for your sanity is to go as high as possible in the level with the rockets and fly downward, making sure that you don't accidentally die as the level, for whatever reason, is floating over a bottomless pit that rides the edges of the lowest platforms. That makes Mad Space the largest of the levels, but instead of being content with just fucking your controls, camera, and day up, the piece de resistance is that each and every hint for the stage is coded. So by the time you reach the pinnacle of doneness, wishing that you were dealing with Security Hall instead, none of the hints actually point you to where you need to go unless you decode it. Hints already sack your point value for finding any piece by a sizable margin, so why the extra slap to the face? Making matters worse, the exactness of a few locations that emerald pieces can be make digging a game of whack-a-mole. Look at this. Look at this. Never mind the fact that I'm already experiencing a never-ending Dutch angle. How do those countrymen do it? How was I supposed to know the latitude and longitude of this shard without trial and error? Fundamentally, if you removed Mad Space, Adventure 2 would be a better game on the whole for both versions of it. Yep, the exclamation mark that Battle has where if you are right on top of a piece, it pops up, doesn't fix the overarching flaws of Mad Space because you are still having to fight against the concept of gravity and the size of the stage making most of Rouge's abilities moot. One other flaw I have with SA2 besides the mixing and story elements are the bosses. Slap fights to the nth degree. A multitude of issues, there can either be little to no strategy involved besides flailing about hoping to hurt your target, like with pretty much all the character battles. The fight takes too long to get going, Egg Golem and King Boom Boo are dreadfully boring and slow, are painfully cheesable, the gun mechs can be beaten in about 10 seconds, or they are hampered by floaty controls and poor hitboxes like with Final Hazard. I said my thoughts on BioWizard, but he is the best boss by sheer circumstance, and well, he's a challenging endeavor with a neat moveset. That puts him head and shoulders above everyone else. To be frank, this isn't a problem central to SA2. Adventure 1 only has one boss I like, Egg Viper, and from Sonic Heroes to Secret Rings, you have some of the worst bosses in the franchise for the 3D have. Slow, boring health sponges that require little input from the player to beat. It took until Unleashed, kinda, and Black Knight to have somewhat interesting encounters in 3D. All the good ones are in 2D. I can absolutely say that I like Sonic Adventure 2 more than 1, and it mostly has to do with the tightening of everything. Sonic levels in the 3D space have finally hit their stride as these fast-paced platforming extravaganzas that test your stage awareness and ability usage. The Tails and Eggman mech levels are everything I enjoyed about Gamma, but more refined with a heavier focus on comboing and speed. And while there are certainly problems with the treasure hunting stages, I do get a mild kick out of them when they aren't fighting me back. The fat has been trimmed to say the least, as while I will miss Sega's Bass Pro Fishing featuring Big the Cat and the Tails Racing with Sonic and Eggman, some playstyles were redundant, sorry Tails, or were well worth dropping like Amy's to focus on the ones that worked better or could be elaborated on. This does lead to a funny little recommendation, as the best way to play Adventure 2 is Battle, which is DLC for the base game on Steam, as opposed to a complete package like it was on the GameCube. I honestly do not know if Adventure 2 HD rolls back all the updates from Battle's GameCube release, so I can't speak for it. I would assume it does. Though I do know finding a dolphin in the ocean does work if you want the full experience instead of what was on offer with the original Adventure 2, which I actively sought out for this video. Blame my unknowing of the Steam port's accuracy. And then 3D Sonic turned to shit. I dread the day I continue with this franchise because Sonic Heroes, controversial opinion for my inner circle, it's not great. Learned the worst lessons from Adventure 2 with damage sponge enemies and bosses, stages that go on for a fortnight, ill-fitting ideas far out of the ballpark of a Sonic game, chaotic stuff said, and the cardinal sin of repetition. Play each stage 4 times. Why? Gotta artificially inflate game length somehow. Shadow's guilty of this as well, but on a larger scale, even if I enjoy the gunplay for what it is. I don't think I'm ready for that conversation, though, as that's another dreadful time I ain't ready to go through. And then it's 06 and Secret Rings, one of those the worst games Sonic's ever been in. Mandatory motion controls are wonderful, aren't they? Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/let's talk about games, no apostrophe in the let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder, or don't. I ain't your Uncle Buck. And as always, this showing of Sonic Adventure 2 is over, but stay tuned for our next feature, the upbeat ball roller Katamari Damacy.